Hey everyone, and welcome to my Procreate demo for the piece I call Agony Part 2. So, let's get right into this. Here's the weapon that I designed for Agony, and this is how the design process began. I essentially just threw a little thumbnail of her lines down in the bottom right, and I started drawing away. Every now and then I would reference weapons from Darksiders just to try and get influenced by them, but I kind of didn't have a vision going into this weapon other than the fact that I wanted it to be either like a hammer or an axe. So you can see here I'm designing it. It's very short-handled right now because I was dealing with canvas sizes. And then here's where I jumped into a new canvas and brought in the hammer from before and started looking at elongating it and everything. Here's a bit of a meat mallet treatment to it, and but you know, none of this was completely feeling like it really fit with Agony aside from the skull or maybe some of that like stone gem stuff that's on the back of it there. So even though I started doodling around, this was a shape that I thought was really cool. I think the basic blade shape was from Darksiders 2, I believe. There was a random axe that I saw in the concept art for that game that had a blade shape sort of like that. So then after I got that basic blade shape, I just took from there and started working it. You can see that there's this face on the back side, and then it goes down to this handle that's crooked with like a hand guard. I thought it was kind of interesting, but ultimately you'll see me do away with it because it's just a little too much. So after doing that super rough with the fat pencil linked below, I then shrank the size of the fat pencil and started moving into this, which is just a slightly cleaner rough than how it is a second ago. So now I'm going in and trying to figure out like a couple of the details, but I'm still not getting too detailed because I just want to, I'm doing this in stages to try and solve it. So you can see there, I shrank it and I stuck it on her back, and I realized that you weren't really going to get to see the hand guard, and that just certain aspects of that wasn't really going to work out. So I still kept the crooked handle, but the hand guard is gone. So now we go from super rough to now tight lines. I'm drawing it in black, which is what I sort of always draw in, but then when I go into the color stages, I shift it to the light purple set to multiply that I did on Agony herself. The process for the weapon and the horse and her headshot from a coloring perspective and the colors I chose and the methods and all that is exactly the same for all of it. That way I could make sure that the look and feel ultimately was going to be synchronized across all four pieces. So you can see here maintaining some of the motifs that are in other aspects of Darksiders art, also motifs that are in aspects of Agony. One of my favorite things about this design is, although clarity might not be the highest with this design, when you look at that axe on her back and you sort of imagine her just really slowly, you know, charging through her environment in these sort of post-apocalyptic landscapes that they have in the Darksiders universe, I just thought that it was kind of cool that she's just like this giant mess of like metal and muscle and rage. So I thought that it all worked together pretty well. We've got this yellowy green scar on her that glows a little bit. It's also in her eyes, and so I decided that that would also be in the weapon, and it would manifest like in what was coming out of that demon head's mouth, and then later it gets brought into her horse as well. So right now we're just noodling in all that detail on the skulls in the sort of skull cluster towards the center. This sort of has a interesting design to the weapon because it's got aspects of it that almost look like Maker's stuff, if you're familiar with the Darksiders lore, but then it goes into like these demon things. So there's like these brackets and screws that look very Makery, and then it goes into the demon stuff, which I think actually fits with her quite a bit as well. She has aspects of her that almost feel like she's a Maker, with a little bit of demon influence, and I think that that sort of works here as well in the weapon. So now we're moving over to that sort of primary demon head over on the right. Oh, I'm jumping all over the place here. So actually I'm back over the skull cluster now. So after we finish up these skulls here, we'll move over to the demon head on the right and get his horn done and just sort of finish him up and get all the spikes running along the back. This part is all fairly self-explanatory, which is why I'm not talking over it too much. Essentially, I'm just trying to make sure that the line work and the overall treatment is going to match what I had already done on Agony before, and make sure that shapes and ultimately colors and a few other things all make sense. Okay, now we're just going to finish the demon's sort of goatee thing that's going on here at the bottom, and then we'll move on to the rest of the handle for the axe. Oh yeah, and of course we got to finish all of the stuff coming out of his mouth too. Okay, so now we're moving down to the bottom. I wanted to have just this sort of little hook blade thing at the bottom, and then try to reconcile exactly how these handle pieces work around how it sort of cuts over at a weird angle. I was imagining, you know, she would use her, see what is it, her right hand at the bottom and her left hand at the top, and she would swing with her right hand sort of leading, so that armor on her right arm is protecting the arm that's forward in the swing, and it's got like this weird leverage thing happening, which is why it's sort of crooked like that. I don't know if any of that actually makes sense. It just felt like it could potentially be cool in motion. And then just to sort of wrap up, bringing some of that demon influence over, even though it's not necessarily like a demon language, but bringing some of those glyphs that are all throughout the Darksiders universe into the blade to really sort of sew up the feel that the design is sort of thorough, that it all ties together in some way. So the next stage is going to be moving into the flats. So you can see here I changed the color of the lines to be this sort of lightish red-purple thing. And then that's set to multiply. Then underneath it, I start flatting in the main shapes using the same colors from her before. There you go. So that's me bringing in now her, like a little lineless version of her from the other file, so that I can just color pick it as clean as possible. No lines, no shadows, and then I just left the background in just to make it simple. And I did the canvas, copy canvas to clipboard, and then pasted it in and shrank it down. So at this point it's kind of mechanical. I'm filling everything in. I'm still making some creative decisions, like where should the various colors be? How am I going to color block this? But ultimately, since I had to pick all these colors before and I wanted them to sync up with her, this is how I did it. As I said before, I was imagining her to be a little bit closer to War, in the sense that she's not wearing tons of different armor throughout her theoretical game, but that she just gets like some upgrades and some very designed for her pieces. And as far as the shadows go, which is what I'm applying right now, I'm using the Select Paint, Select Clear method that I've discussed before, and a video that highlights a simplistic version of that is linked down below, so you can check that out if you'd like to. This is the most organized way I find to do this, particularly in Procreate, where you're limited in the way that you do selections or the way that you might do smart objects or masks or things like that. Even the way folders work and all of that. So there we got some glow from the smoke in there too. My light source for this is actually weird, because my light source is coming from the right to the left, because I know that I'm going to eventually flip it and stick it on her back and have that be the light source. So if you imagine that she's lit from top down, and then you look at that little thumbnail with the weapon on it, I'm lighting it in that way. So there I just cleared everything that's on that sort of orange metal, and I am doing the shadows just for that part alone. And now I'm doing the highlight pass. So this is all done the exact same way as I did it on Agony. So the shadows are like a blue that is a very, very light bluish purplish color that's set to multiply. And then the highlights are like a very, very light yellow to the point of almost being white, set to soft light. And then both of those have their opacities adjusted for whatever I'm trying to go for as far as intensity goes. The nice thing about that is obviously it allows you to control your contrast very easily. I can either darken the shadow layer or turn up its opacity. I can turn up the opacity on the highlight, and it can give me a much more extreme looking image based on what I'm going for. The actual highlight I think is set to something really mild, like 18 or 20%, because otherwise it would just be way too shiny for the look that I'm going for here. So as this part wraps up here, which will just be a couple of little details here or there, this is essentially where this stops. We're going to see a background pop in here for a second, but this is the design of the weapon, more or less with all of the colors applied, all of the colors being pulled directly from Agony in the other image, from the other image, I should say. And so now here you can see this is exactly it. We'll do a quick close-up where we pan through the image so that you can see exactly what that looks like there. And next, we're going to move on to the horse, who I named Rage. I said this when I posted it on Instagram, but I don't know if Rage is actually taken as an official name anywhere in the Darksiders universe, so apologize if it actually is already taken. Okay, so now what you're seeing here is me drawing a horse, which I never do. I've probably never drawn a horse, or at least started to when I was younger and hated it and stopped. So what I'm doing here is I'm looking at reference for the way Joe Mad drew horses for Darksiders, because it's a very specific look. And then I'm also referencing some other artistic takes on horses done completely unrelated to Darksiders. At first I was mostly just looking at Ruin from the first Darksiders. Then I was looking a little bit at Despair later from the second Darksiders. And here you can see me tweaking a bunch of stuff to try and get my proportions correct. And then the reason that I was looking at other artistic takes on horses is because since I'm not very experienced drawing horses, I wanted to see other ways that artists had tried to stylize horses. So I was looking at old stuff from, like, you know, old Disney stuff where they were trying to get the feel of a horse, and newer things, and I was just sort of looking all over so that I could understand some of the way the muscles lay and sort of what Joe and his team working on Darksiders had done to try and capture the horse. So at that point I thought that I had enough of a base to go on. It's not perfect, but I have never drawn a horse before, so I didn't expect it to be perfect. But what I figured is I'd be able to tweak some things as I go. The horses in Darksiders are incredibly muscular. They're very beefy. They have like a stockiness to them. I think that Despair, the horse from the second Darksiders, is much closer to a regular horse, and Ruin just looks like a bulldog horse pit bull hybrid type thing. And I wanted a horse that looked like it could stand with Ruin, because Agony is she's just beefy. She's huge, right? And I wanted a horse that looked like he could actually put up with that. So that's where we're going here. Now, I wanted this horse to look, I might switch my pronouns around because I haven't decided if this horse is male or female. I really don't have much of an opinion, but so I might say this horse or it or she at some point. So this horse I just wanted to look a little older and still really rough, but I didn't have like a fire theme and I didn't have like a ghostly theme like with Despair. I just figured, okay, I'm going to incorporate a couple of aspects from the armor that Agony has, and then I'm going to incorporate like the scars and all that. And I think that that would be enough. In retrospect, I might have made this horse look too similar to Agony, but again, I wasn't operating on a lot of story here. I was just sort of doing this as a fun design exercise, so it's not perfect. But as far as me probably never completing a drawing of a horse and taking it to finish, I'm okay with it. I'll live with it. So here you'll see me sort of struggle with the elbows of the horse. The elbow slash knee of the horse, it's just a little strange. And again, I'm trying to get this like beefy muscular look while also trying to get the fact that like horses have really thin legs. So I'm sort of all over the place trying to solve that problem. And now that I'm looking at it in retrospect, watching this play back, I think I like the previous knee better, but whatever. So now here's where I'm starting to incorporate some of the armor. Obviously, you know, Agony has this big sash, this big yellow sash, and I thought it'd be kind of cool if this horse had like an X. It's like a sash that's attaching the saddle to some degree to the horse. And then I want this like heavy black hair hanging down. I thought that that'd be nice. And Ruin and Agony both, Ruin and Despair both, I don't think have like much of a bridle. It's not really a bridle, but like this head helmet thing. So I wanted that there. The bridle actually doesn't actually appear in game, I think, for either Darksiders 1 or Darksiders 2, but it's in a lot of the concepts. So I wrote "Here we go" there with a big exhale, because now that I've got this sort of base horse, now we're going to throw on all this crazy armor. And I was watching Sleepless in Seattle when I was drawing this. That just flashed into my mind. So it's probably not the right material to be watching while working on this, but whatever. So as I was saying, I may have come a little bit too close to designing this horse to look too much like Agony. This horse has the nose piercing just like Agony. I did the bridle to sort of look like her cheek piercings. I did the sashes to look like her sashes, and then she's got the the green scars all over her, and then she's got the tail that has two beads in it, which is similar to the long bit of hair from Agony, having that bead in it. So it's maybe a little too on the nose. I might change it, but again, I don't have much of a story behind here. So when you look at Death's horse, Despair, there's definitely a death vibe to that horse. It's like ghostly, it's spectral, and they probably thought about that. Same thing with Ruin. Maybe they didn't think about it, maybe they did. I would like to think that they did. So with me, I was just sort of mimicking aspects of Agony, and that probably didn't have to be quite so much. So I like to think that what happened was whatever caused the scars, the big cuts on Agony, also caused them on her horse, Rage, and it happened to both of them at the same time. Like she was riding into battle, and it was some giant demon thing that just like completely smashed them and scratched them, and it got both of them at the same time, and that's sort of why they have the same scars. So while I was drawing this horse, because there's a lot of elements here, there were a lot of layers in the middle of doing it, and you can see that with how much I'm sort of drawing directly over something that I've already drawn. You can always see how unsure I am that I'm going to be able to draw something correctly based on how many layers I have. And so even though all of these little pieces of armor and things, like I've drawn armor a million times, I haven't drawn armor on horses a million times. So there's a lot here that I could have done better. In fact, I would have liked to have some more detail in the saddles specifically. But at this point, I had already done the headshot. It's out of order for this video. I had already done the headshot. I had already done the full body. I already did the weapon, and I was looking down the barrel of having to do this horse. So this is me saying I probably rushed it a little bit, but again, I do these videos for fun, and I do this art for fun. So at the same time, there was a lot of other stuff that was taking over my attention. In fact, there'll be future videos that you'll see. The next video that I do after this is going to be another character from my Village Corrupted storyline, and then after that there's going to be yet another one. And so those were really taking a lot of my mind share while I was working on this. I was jumping over and working on those and then coming back and working on this. So here's the part where I thought that the lines were a little bit too heavy on the sash. So if you rewind a bit, you can see I went in and cleaned that up a little bit. And now I'm trying to flesh out the details of the rest of the saddle. I wanted to have this slightly layered armor thing, and it's not really supposed to be a spoiler, but I end up sort of adding this spoiler like what would be on a car on it that's got these additional spikes. And I just thought that that would be cool to sort of almost create this pocket. It's more of a visual pocket than anything where Agony would sit. You can also see that I penciled in stirrups for her to put her feet in, but I ended up not putting them in ultimately. And even though I kept the bridle in, if you look at a lot of the concept art for Darksiders, there's stirrups and bridles, but then they don't actually make it into the game. And I just sort of said, okay, I'm not going to put the stirrups in because that's going to involve me making sure a lot of sizing is correct in regards to Agony. And she has giant feet, and I was like, what the fuck is that going to look like? Because I wasn't really designing it all together. So I decided to leave them out just to keep that a little bit more open. So now we've got this cloth hanging down in the back, which you can see there I was going to actually make it dimensional, and then I realized, nah, I should make that a silhouette just to sort of keep it more of a symbol, more of just a shape than have it actually be physical. Here comes in the spoiler right there on the back. Again, not intended to be like a true spoiler, but I just thought it'd be an interesting design element. There you can see where I turn off the layer for all of the other armor. You can see what's left of the original horse because so much is getting erased away while all of these new details are getting added in. And then here I'm adding like a little ornamental embellishment. Its purpose, you know, not necessarily expressed in the final artwork, but the idea is that it's some sort of a loop for something, either for something to get attached to it or for the horse to attach to something else or whatever. And then I have the problem of what to do with the hooves. If you look at Despair, he's got these sort of ghostly trails. If you look at Ruin, where Ruin walks, there's like fire and everything. So I thought what I'd do is at this point, I would embrace the green glow from the scars and the green glow from her axe and say that there's some sort of an acidic, poisonous, corrosive aspect to the way Rage walks. So that's what's going on at the bottom there. Like you could imagine those feet just constantly eroding what it's stepping on. Not so much to the point to where, you know, the horse would fall through the ground or anything, but it's just, it's the hooves, the feet, are just doing damage wherever it stands. And I knew ultimately that was going to have some sort of a transparency effect going on, but I wanted to represent it also in the lines. So that's why you see like the little bit of those hoof lines that are then broken up a bit. So now we're going to wrap up the hoof burning, smoky type thing. And here's where I start making sure that I'm incorporating some holes in the legs. Again, this is something that like Despair has, but I wanted to make it more of the poison, venom, whatever it is, corrosive aspect sort of coming through. And here we're going to finally get that tail in there. I wanted to have 2 beads on it. Maybe there are a couple more beads in Agony's dreads, but for this, I just wanted to get 2 to sort of differentiate it a little bit. And the idea that it's a normal horsetail that's long, and then it's sort of, you know, gathered at a bead and then gathered at another bead. Now this is just a weird little trinket that I decided to throw in here so that we could start getting a couple of more items on the horse. It's sort of like a lantern that's been pinched in the middle, and it's got like at first I wanted it to look kind of warped, but then I said, no, let's not have it be warped. Let's actually have it be sort of gathered across the middle. So I'll add like a rope there in a second. And I didn't really know where I wanted that thing to go, other than I wanted it to be some sort of a mystical lantern that did some sort of a thing, and that it was tied to the side of the horse. And you can see the glass is a little bit broken there, but then I always knew that I was going to end up ultimately solving that in the colors, because if it was going to have any type of a mystical quality to it, it was going to have to be at that stage. So you'll see that come in like at the very end of coloring, where I sort of throw that together last second. And then here we have a quick head adjustment. Just a little size and a little bit of a tilt to try and get some of these proportions a little bit more tied up. And then this horse has a lot going on, but I felt like I'd be remiss if I didn't get at least a little bit of sort of like etched into the skin glyph action going on it. Again, I think there's a lot going on, but there's a lot going on in a lot of these designs. So I didn't really think that it was too much, and I thought that it would ultimately help the design. You'll see when I get to color, though, I don't bring a lot of attention to these glyphs. I don't make them like glowing orange or glowing green or something. I just sort of keep them another shade of the skin, like they've been burned in or something along those lines. So now here you saw me bring in that flat from Agony, and now I'm starting to block in the main shapes for Rage. So we've got this dark gray is the major color of the sort of like bear horse itself. What I wanted to do is I wanted it to be dark. I didn't want it to be light like Despair, but I didn't want to go super warm like Ruin. I wanted this to feel like a horse that came from the same type of horses but wasn't the exact same thing as Ruin. So that's what we got going on here. And now this is just the normal flattening process. I'm going through and trying to decide how many things I want to look exactly like the way Agony looks, and I'm making some new decisions for some of the things that are just a little bit different than the way Agony's colors are. So the scars, and then where there's sort of the holes in the horse's legs, scar over the eye, these are all things that I know I'm ultimately going to put a glow around. So you can see there when Agony popped up for a second, there's almost all the colors are shared, like 100%. So now here we are on the flats. You can see that lantern just looks like whatever. It's not really flatted to look like much of anything right now. And we're starting on the shadow process. Of course, we're doing select paint, select clear. So that's how I'm moving through this entire horse. So you can watch how the whole thing gets built, and it's just the same way as always. Here's an example where the original flats that worked for Agony didn't really work out for Rage, because you can see here, right there, I just took the wraps on the saddle and the wraps that are attaching the lantern, and I made those darker because they were just way too bright and they were really distracting in the design. And then here I clear out where the sort of caustic smoke is, and then I add a little bit of a cooler transition, and then I put the shadows from the hooves in so that it still feels like those hooves are in there, and that the material, the sort of smoke and all that shit is still fairly opaque, but that you can still see something sort of coming through there. Now we're on to the highlight pass, which is fairly minimal for this one. Per usual, here come in some of the effects really quick. We got some glows all over the place. We've got some discoloration on the horse. We've got some shines on the hair. And then filling in that background in general, just getting that haloed effect that is on sort of a lot of the pieces here. And then you'll see the lantern stuff coming really quick. Oh, there's a little bit of vignetting and a little bit of the sort of bringing in the environment all around the horse. And here's the lantern effects, which is all just raw painted on top of the lines. And there you go. That is Rage, Agony's horse. Here's a bit of a pan across so you can see some of the details. And lastly, let's get into this headshot. So I just wanted to get a close-up so that we could really key in on the type of attitude that Agony has. Here she is from the full body shot. And then I'm just roughing in now what I want her face to look like. At first I wanted this to be stoic, which is what you see here. Then I go into an emotion. I wanted it like she was like yelling. But that would be okay if I was going to do like a few headshots that sort of capture emotion. And it's like, oh, there's a yelling one and a calm one and a, I don't know. I don't think I'd ever see her like crying or maybe laughing, like sort of in a scary way, I guess. But I decided not to do that. So you see here I'm starting to play with her yelling. It's obviously very cartoonish looking because these are roughs and it would get cleaned up and sharpened and made to look a little bit more ferocious if I really started working with it. But I really kind of didn't like it. Although looking back on it now, it might have been fun to keep doing. So maybe I'll... who am I kidding? I'm not going to revisit this character probably. This was fun, but there a lot went into this already. So you can see here I'm wrapping up the rough for, hey, what does she look like angry? And then you can see there I wrote meh across it. And then I went back to my original sketch of her being more stoic. And that's really just because I wanted this sort of like quiet, this quiet rage about her, and that she looks imposing, and all the glow that's in her, sort of the green glow sort of looks a little on the sinister side, but that she also kind of looks like a warrior that is thinking, I guess you could say. I don't know. I guess you could compare it to like Thrall from World of Warcraft or something like that, where it's like this honorable warrior type vibe. So this is more or less just me doing a headshot drawing. So it's pretty simple. I'm using the fat pencil, which is linked below. The video for how to create it is linked below. And she's got these like sort of cat eyes, these demon cat eyes, because I really want that to be a part of her character. And then the thing that takes the longest for this is actually the dreads again, because of all the little lines that go into that. So you can see there's the purple lines set to multiply. We're picking up all those colors again, and I didn't do the full body, so I brought that gradient in just to cover that up. I knew she was going to get superimposed somewhere in like a character sheet, so that wasn't that big of a deal. And then at some point you see me putting in her shoulder pad like in the distance, like blurred out, but I wasn't accounting for it here, but I knew I was going to do it in colors. So right there, the flat process is already done. She's obviously very easy to flat. There's only a couple of key colors. And now I'm just doing the exact same process again. The same shadows set to multiply. It'll be the same highlights in a second. Same green glow, same all this. And that's just to make sure that there's consistency across all of it. Obviously, if I was going to try and show her in other scenarios, in a different environment, maybe a blue cavern or something, I would start tweaking some of these things. But since this is all supposed to exist on the same sheet, I'm just keeping it all 100% the same. And now we start throwing on the highlights on the cheek and then on the nose, and then it starts moving throughout everything. I don't use the same highlight on the gold at the end because I end up going in with just like a pure white and cutting in some hard shines on that. I want to get these little nicks and scratches across her skin because they do that in the Darksiders universe. The characters just look like they're really weathered and that they have this history. They're wearing this history on their face. So I wanted to make sure that that was still in this as well. I really like the way that she came out in general, and I like the way that this headshot came out just because she looks pissed, but she doesn't look out of control, and I think that's neat. I think that it'd also be cool to show her out of control at some point, like she's just got some sort of trigger that really throws her off. But oh, and then there you go, there's the shadow, and then some, excuse me, not the shadow, the shoulder, and then the vignetting, and then bringing some of the brown of the environment in around her to try and settle her into her environment. Now we're adding like a little bit of a rim light action there. And then lowering the opacity on that a little bit. And there she is. All done. So here's the complete sheet. You can see the headshot, you can see the horse, you can see her, you can see her weapon, you can see her name. I actually assembled the sheet in Photoshop because even though Procreate's got so many great things, sort of taking all of these different files and collaging them together is actually a giant pain in the ass. So I just exported them all as PSDs to my Mac and then assembled them in Photoshop in the sort of classic way. So I hope you enjoyed these videos. They were long. The entire process was really long, But I thank you for watching. If you enjoyed what you saw, please consider liking and subscribing, and I'll see you on the next one. If you're looking for me on the internet, these are the places where you can find me.